If you thought hip-hop drama had already scraped the bottom of the barrel, you were wrong. What unfolded behind that locked hotel door last night didn't just flip the internet upside down. It dragged it straight into the gutter and left it bleeding. This wasn't a simple slip-up or a blurry rumor. This was calculated, intimate, and vicious. The kind of betrayal that doesn't just break hearts. It shatters entire bloodlines of loyalty in the culture. According to sources who were close enough to smell the fear in the air, Blueface didn't stumble upon whispers. He walked into a nightmare he had already half expected but never fully prepared his soul for. There, in that neutral ground suite where the lights were dim and the sheets still carried the scent of fresh lies, he caught Pooh Shiesty and Chrisean rock together. Not just talking. Not just laughing. Caught in a moment so raw and entangled that time itself seemed to freeze in disgust. The door clicked open, and the air turned thick with the stench of crossed lines that could never be uncrossed. The internet didn't just react. It detonated. Screenshots flew like shrapnel. Fans who once defended these names now tore them apart with the same energy they once used to hype their tracks. Questions nobody wanted answered started pouring in. How long had this been brewing? Was this revenge? Was this a setup orchestrated from the shadows? Or had the streets finally collected on debts that had been ignored for too long? In a world where every private second can become public ammunition, nothing happens by pure accident. Someone always knows. Someone always watches. And someone always pays. Imagine standing in Blueface position for a second. Same woman who carried your child. Same man you once moved with in the same circles. Same hotel where privacy is supposed to be sacred. Would you kick the door wider and let the cameras feast? Would you walk away in silence while your pride rotted inside you? Or would you let the darkness that lives in every real one take over? Because this wasn't just cheating. This was a violation of every code that keeps the game from eating its own. The night didn't begin with violence or screaming. It started the way the most poisonous stories always do, with quiet, creeping signals that only the paranoid or the deeply invested notice. Late-night DMs that lingered a beat too long. Stories viewed and then quickly deleted. Locations that overlapped in ways that felt too convenient. Pooh Shiesty and Chrisean Rock had been orbiting each other in the same cities, the same after-parties, the same shadowy corners where the industry pretends it's just networking. Blueface had been carrying his own storm for months. His public face was still the chaotic, unfiltered energy everyone loved to hate, but behind it, he had been studying patterns like a predator who learned patience the hard way. Every time the world thought he was spiraling, he was actually watching, cataloging, waiting for the exact second when the mask would slip. And when it came to Chrisean, the masks had been slipping for a while. Their relationship had always been a public circus. Fights turned content, breakups turned streams, makeups turned into baby announcements. But beneath the noise, Chrisean had grown dangerously isolated. The constant spotlight had warped her sense of loyalty until attention started feeling like love and secrecy started feeling like freedom. Pooh Shiesty, on the other hand, carried a different weight. His name still echoed with that Memphis street credibility that made softer rappers nervous. He wasn't built for Instagram love triangles or messy blog drama. His reputation was forged in real consequences. In a world where mistakes don't get deleted, they get remembered in scars. That's exactly why his name landing in this particular filth sent shockwaves through both the industry and the streets. People didn't assume it was random. They assumed it was intentional. A power move. A quiet disrespect wrapped in desire. The early red flags were subtle but deadly. A like on a story that should have been ignored. A comment that carried too much familiarity. Mutual friends posting from the same venues within hours. Fans, those sleepless digital detectives, started circling timestamps and circling locations like vultures. Why they both in the same city again? Ain't that the hotel he checked into? This don't feel right. At first it looked like classic internet overreach, paranoia looking for patterns in chaos. But the fire kept growing because the smoke was real. Blueface noticed. Instead of exploding online like the old version of himself would have, he went deathly quiet. That silence was the most terrifying part. Those around him saw the shift immediately. Shorter texts, cancelled sessions, eyes that looked through people instead of at them. When a man who built his brand on loud chaos suddenly chooses silence, it doesn't mean his healing. It means his loading. Calculating every possible outcome, every possible humiliation, every possible way this could end in blood or in business. Meanwhile, the online narrative fractured into warring camps. Some defended Chrisean, screaming that she owed no man ownership over her body or her choices. Others called her reckless, pointing to the long history of volatility that followed her like a shadow. A smaller, colder group whispered that this wasn't passion, it was sabotage. Pooh Shiesty's camp stayed radio silent, which only amplified the noise. In the streets, silence isn't neutrality. It's strategy. It's the calm before someone decides whether this stays on timelines or moves to back alleys. The hotel itself became a symbol of everything rotten about fame. A sterile, expensive box where people pretend the outside world can't touch them. But phones don't respect locks. Hallways have eyes. And in 2026, privacy is a luxury that died years ago. Sources close to the situation say this wasn't a spontaneous drunk decision. It was planned in that casual, dangerous way that feels harmless until it isn't. A late text. "Are you up?" that carried more weight than it should. The kind of meetup that starts with denial and ends with destruction. Blueface didn't storm the lobby. He didn't announce his arrival with drama. He moved like a man who already knew the ending but needed to see it with his own eyes. When you go looking for confirmation of betrayal rather than truth, your heart has already built the coffin. He reached that door with the quiet confidence of someone prepared for the worst. And the worst was waiting. What happened inside that room in those first few seconds will never be fully captured on camera, but the fragments that leaked painted a picture darker than any headline. No immediate live stream. No perfectly angled fight video. Just raw human shock. The kind where voices drop and eyes widen and the air fills with a sour taste of exposed secrets. Some witnesses later
described yelling. Others said it was eerily quiet, the silence of three people realizing that whatever came next would scar them all permanently. The only consistent detail was the exposure. Everyone felt naked. Not just physically, soul naked. Within hours the machine kicked into overdrive. Burner accounts dropped the first cropped screenshots. Vague enough to avoid lawsuits, clear enough to destroy reputations. You're still sleeping on this. This ain't coincidence, this is choice. Timelines were stitched together with flight records, hotel bookings, studio logs, and deleted Instagram stories. One detail after another aligned like bullets in a chamber. Pooh had been in the same city days earlier. Chrisean had posted a story from a block away. Nothing proved guilt by itself, but together they built a story so coherent that truth became secondary to belief. Then came the alleged DMs, casual on the surface, filthy underneath. Short replies loaded with inside jokes. "You good? Where you at? Come through quiet." One message in particular went nuclear, a simple voice note that sounded too comfortable, too intimate, too much like two people who had done this before. Fans slowed it down, enhanced the audio, turned it into evidence. Screenshots don't need court validation when they feel this real. They only need to spread. Blogs entered cautiously at first, hiding behind allegedly and sources say. But once one posted, the floodgates opened. Headlines turned savage. Reaction channels feasted. Comment sections became war zones. Defenders called it body autonomy. Accusers called it street code violation. Blueface became both victim and clown in the same breath, the cruel duality of public humiliation. Behind closed doors, pressure mounted from every direction. Managers begged for silence. Lawyers warned about defamation. Street associates asked the real question: how far are we letting this slide? But silence in the age of algorithms doesn't kill stories. It fertilizes them. Every hour without a statement felt like an admission. And when the first grainy hallway video surfaced, poor lighting, muffled voices, but unmistakable cadence, everything escalated again. Fans became forensic experts. They boosted audio, added subtitles, matched timestamps. Sarcasm turned venomous. Memes dripped with poison. Nothing says loyalty like a midnight hotel special. Streets delivering room service now. The laughter masked something uglier. Genuine bloodlust for downfall. Blueface finally broke his silence, but not with rage. He dropped a single, surgical post that cut deeper than any rant. A short line that said everything without saying anything. It told the world he knew. It told the world he was watching reactions. And most dangerously, it told the world he wasn't done. Pooh Shiesty Chrisean responded with indirect smoke, reposted lyrics, vague captions about fake narratives. The kind of non-denial that keeps your core supporters calm while leaving everyone else suspicious. In real street culture, those moves usually mean the real conversations are happening on encrypted calls and through trusted middlemen trying to prevent bodies from dropping. Chrisean's response was pure emotional shrapnel. Cryptic posts about betrayal, pressure, feeling trapped in a narrative she never asked for. Some read guilt. Others read pain. Both interpretations poured gasoline on the fire. Every emoji became a conspiracy theory. Every deleted story became proof of panic. Then the darkest rumor of all surfaced. Whispers of hush money. Transfers late at night. Gifts sent as apologies. No concrete proof, but the suggestion alone was radioactive. Because once people believe someone is buying silence, innocence becomes impossible. Reaction channels ran with it until the narrative completely escaped the control of the people involved. It now belonged to the mob, and the mob was starving. Another name started trending, not directly in the room, but close enough to smell the smoke. Someone with real influence. Someone with history. Speculation ran wild. Puppet master, peacemaker, or the reason things hadn't gone fully nuclear yet. The truth barely mattered. The shift in stakes did. What began as a personal knife fight suddenly looked like a larger power struggle over narrative control, money, and street respect. Alliances were tested in private. Phones went quiet. Inner circles tightened like nooses. As days dragged on, the visible changes became haunting. Blueface pulled back from everything. Studio sessions vanished. Appearances cancelled. He didn't look broken. He looked recalibrated. Cold. Focused. The kind of focus that scares people more than outbursts ever could. Chrisean unraveled in public while trying to hold herself together in private. Her posts swung between talk of growth and hints of suffocating pressure. Fans couldn't decide if they were watching a woman healing or a woman cracking under the weight of her own choices. The spectacle fed on her uncertainty. Pooh Shiesty remained the most locked down of all. No posts. No explanations. Just strategic absence. His supporters called it maturity. Critics called it cowardice. Those who understood his background saw something colder: survival instinct. When you've already survived real cages and real consequences, internet noise doesn't rattle you. What rattles you is the possibility that this could leave the apps and enter the real world where apologies don't fix bullet holes. Private mediations supposedly happened. Respected voices from both sides tried to cool the temperature. Nobody wanted irreversible escalation. Pride had already taken the driver's seat, and pride in hip-hop has buried more careers, and sometimes more people, than any federal case ever could. Labels watched nervously. Sponsors distanced themselves. Opportunities dried up not because guilt was proven, but because association had become toxic. The regret phase hit quietly. Behind the scenes, people admitted the lines had blurred too fast. Assumptions replaced conversations. Ego blocked clarity. But regret can't delete screenshots. It can't rewind the moment that door opened. And it definitely can't satisfy an audience that had already invested in the destruction arc. Nobody truly won. Blueface gained fleeting sympathy but lost whatever fragile piece he had left. Chrisean gained attention but lost control over her own story. Pooh Shiesty kept his outward composure but gained a permanent question mark next to his name in certain circles. Every victory came soaked in cost. And those costs don't fade when the trends do. Weeks later, the noise didn't die because justice was served. It died because the internet found a newer, fresher carcass to pick apart. But for the three people at the center, nothing returned to normal. Trust didn't just fracture, it disintegrated into dust. Circles realigned. Old friendships suddenly carried suspicion. That single moment of weakness or impulse or deliberate disrespect had rewritten the rest of their chapters whether they liked it or not. In hindsight, it all felt sickeningly preventable. One honest conversation that never happened. One boundary that was never enforced. One impulse that outweighed years of shared history and shared pain. Most downfalls don't start with explosions. They start with small, quiet decisions that feel exciting in the moment and poisonous in the aftermath. No official statements ever cleaned it up. No receipts tied every loose end. No tearful confession gave the public the closure it craved. Real life rarely does. It gives distance. It gives silence. It gives people room to rewrite history in whatever version lets them sleep without nightmares. Chrisean eventually stepped back from the spotlight without announcement, just a slow fade that spoke louder than any breakdown. Blueface resurfaced later, colder and more guarded, carrying the weight of a man who had seen too much too clearly. Pooh Shiesty kept moving on the surface like nothing had changed, but those close to him knew better. Something had shifted underneath. A new caution. A new calculation. The internet filed the story away under another hip-hop mess. But for anyone paying real attention, it was something far more twisted. It was a brutal masterclass in how fast perception becomes reality, how loyalty evaporates under pressure, and how unforgiving the digital coliseum can be. Celebrity doesn't shield you from consequences, it magnifies them until they swallow you whole. This story didn't end with dramatic arrests or redemption arcs. It ended with quiet distance, with relationships permanently altered, with doors that, once opened in betrayal, could never be closed again. The secret didn't vanish when the cameras left. It stayed lodged in minds, in group chats, in late-night thoughts that refused to die. So the real question isn't just what happened in that hotel room. The real question is what happens in the long, ugly silence afterward, when the spotlight moves on but the damage keeps breathing. When trust becomes a foreign language. When every future relationship carries the ghost of that one night. When pride, perception, and pressure prove once again that they can collapse empires built on much stronger foundations than love or loyalty ever were. One decision, one unlocked door, one moment of twisted desire, and suddenly everything that once felt solid starts crumbling in slow motion. The internet picked its villains early. It chose its heroes and its clowns. But the full truth, the ugly, complicated, human truth, almost never survives the timeline intact. It stays buried where it hurts the most, in the private darkness that follows every public explosion.